Considering there's only really 4 characters and it's only really 2 sets, was it also very small, just staffing-wise, and was the shoot short, or like, you want to talk some about that?
Sure. Actually, Cooper produces, he's been producing for a really long time. This wasn't his first, this is my first feature, but it wasn't his, and he produces commercials and music videos and sometimes the Lonely Island shorts for SNL. I don't know if you guys ever see those. Not Pick in the Box, but YOLO, I think. But so he's a really good producer, and he stretched the money, and I think some days we had 60 people working on the crew, and we shot for 28 days, which even for some of his indies, that was a pretty good stretch, but I think it gave us the time to make fewer mistakes, so it's good.
Any questions in the audience? Right there.
Yeah, I want to know about the 3 characters and like how you decided on those characters in your release.
The characters or the actors?
The characters.
The characters.
When writing the story, like why was it, these 3 friends in a house like that?
Got it. I mean, in a very broad sense, I think we chose this sort of scenario because, again, we were really on budget. We were like, how could we create enough drama for a movie in more or less one location? But in terms of these specific characters, I think, boy, that's tough. I'm trying to think. I know Finn. Finn is basically, he has a lot of me in him. Like, if I had this machine, I would be obsessing about, my next project. And like, well, what does the script look like? Like holding the script pages up, Like, really, that's what I would use it for. So, but I think, the greed was an easy one. Jasper's sort of, point of view and how he gets so tripped up by the machine, and then his character sort of blossomed around that. And then, I guess, I don't know, and then I think we just started thinking about love and relationships, and if that was sort of forefront in Callie's mind, and then maybe once we had, it probably wasn't that literal or structured, but once we had those sort of points of view, then I think the characters sort of grew out of those.
So that leads into another question. Tell us about your casting process. You found some really great actors to fill those roles.
Oh, thank you. I try not to think about actors while we're writing, at least, because I don't want to get my hopes set on somebody, or even just get somebody's voice too much in my head. So we waited until we were pretty much ready to go. And then Rick Montgomery, who is a really well-established casting director in LA, he read the script and wanted to come on board as a producer, which gave us a lot more options. We could actually get agents on the phone, and people would actually, take our calls. Even then, I guess we started talking about Danielle because we'd just seen her at South by Southwest in a movie called Girls Against Boys, which I think is awesome. If anybody hasn't seen it, you should go see it. And so she was sort of in there in the discussions even towards the tail end of the writing, but the other actors, was more or less the standard sort of audition process. Or I guess with Matt and George, they're sort of big enough now where you can't really audition them for a project at this level. You just sort of take a meeting and talk a lot about the script and see if you kind of have, jive in terms of what you think. And of course you look at their previous material, but yeah, I guess that was more or less the process.
I was wondering about, well, I noticed that the photographs of the scientists at Stormy Davis, so how do you get him for a photographic camera?
Oh man, this is heartbreaking. So he actually has scenes that we cut from the movie, flashback scenes. And I was so excited to shoot with him because I grew up with Raiders of the Lost Ark and, of course, Lord of the Rings. And, the day he shot with us was, like, the best day of my life. Up to that moment, like, no fooling. I mean, I tried not to geek out, but then he started telling Raiders of the Lost Ark stories, so then I just, the geek just, like, exploded. Like, I just tore my shirt off. I was like, let's talk about this. And he took, he was so sweet. He, like, did autographs for the whole crew, and he's a really professional, amazing actor to work with. He just kept giving and giving. He fell off a ladder for part of his, and he wanted to do his own stunt. I mean, the guy's, like, he's in his 70s now, but unfortunately, the flashback scenes he was involved in test screenings, we realized that as writers we had kind of failed. The information in those scenes you sort of got elsewhere in the movie. So it was a little redundant, and then also it was really slowing the movie down right at a point where it needed to be sped up. And so after a couple of test screenings, we were like, let's try pulling it out, and it definitely played better without it. So it'll be on the DVD.
Anyone else? Oh,
It was lots of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It was, my imagination was running pretty crazy at parts. So, are there any like pretty funny or weird storylines that you came up with that didn't end up making it, but went pretty far?
Interesting, right? Weird storylines. I mean, in our writing process, we tend to start at the beginning and start note carding across a wall, and the note cards will kind of trail off into a little stream and then die and get boring, and then we'll sort of go back to like, well, where was this still working, you know? And so our initial outline just looks like a tree kind of laid on its side, and then when we finally find a storyline that gets all the way to the end, then we, you know, then it's like, oh, okay, great, and we trim off all the branches that didn't work. And I'm trying to think now what any of those branches might have been, but I don't know. You're right, there's a lot of ways it could have gone, and we have a lot of people talking to us now about potentially doing a sequel or trying to do a TV show because it's very episodic. But we were so focused on keeping it in such a small space that I don't think we did deviate that much. Like this, you know, we could go too far without getting really expensive or, you know, bringing in a bunch more characters or things like that. So, sorry, I don't have a cooler answer for you, but yeah.
And I was wondering if that was something you guys knew at the start, came across at any point.
No, that was a big oh shit moment
Oh, yeah.
while we were in pre-production. It turns out there's actually a few projects that have this this type of premise. I think there's supposedly a French movie in the 40s or something even that has like a camera that can see. I think maybe it's the past. No, it's not the past. Yeah, I guess it would be the future. Anyway, but yeah, in pre-production, we were rolling. We were like starting to spend money, and then someone's like, "Oh yeah, this is like that Twilight Zone episode," and we just look at each other like, "Oh god, what?" So we went and watched it, and there's even gambling in it. I mean, there's, you know, and we're like, "Well, you know, what are we gonna do? Like, we can't stop." And it was different enough where I didn't feel like I was just completely retreading his territory, but. Then, as we went along, there's like a Goosebumps episode or show or something, I think, that has like, I think it's even got Ryan Gosling in it. It's pretty awesome. You should see it as like a kid. So, I don't know. At a certain point, we just sort of relaxed into, we're like, well, whatever, you know. And then somebody said something kind to me when I was stressing about it one day. They said, you know, pretty much any science fiction post-Twilight Zone owes something to Twilight Zone. I was like, okay, fair enough.
One question about the camera. The design for it, where did the idea come from?
Great question. Yeah, the camera design. I have a graphic arts background, but I didn't actually draw the machine. I had a sort of a list of qualities. I knew I wanted it to be analog. I didn't want to see any LEDs or computer chips. I wanted to feel very much of like sort of like a weird like, I don't know, future past, you know, almost like if sci-fi had spun out of the 50s or 60s, you know, what would it look like? And then we hired a concept artist, Hart Sheckman, out in Philly, and we just worked remotely. It was like our pitch packet material to try to lure actors in or to get more money. And when it came time to make the movie, I was like, well, it's not really going to look like that. It'll look like something else, you know, whatever we can afford. But then we got a great fabricator, Dave Mendoza, and he just killed it. He went to this. He got a lot of parts from I think an airplane graveyard out in LA. And even sourced some pieces from the actual abandoned apartment complex we were shooting in, and just sort of crafted this thing over the course of the shoot. So by the last week it was done, and yeah, we were really happy.
I believe I remember seeing an old cartoon animated short called Fallen Art, which was essentially some pictures of dead soldiers that we fed into the siege. And they were making a little dance of each frame being a soldier in a different form. And seeing that huge thing just reminded me of that.
Wow. Interesting. No, that sounds really awesome. No, now one more thing I have to go investigate.
Yep.
Another great question. An artist by the name of Aaron Needham did the paintings, and some of them I just sort of gave him very vague parameters. I was like, you know, I think they're going to see a red dress today, so if you could incorporate that somehow, you know, and so he would go do it. He did a great job. We still have all the paintings in a storage unit with the machine and all the other props. I guess a tidbit about that scene is that he couldn't be there to paint those numbers that day, and Matt O'Leary, he does do a little painting during when the skull painting is being done. Like we actually had him practice doing skulls. Like one of the abandoned apartments in the complex, there's just skulls all over the walls from him just practicing over and over again. And so he does actually do a little bit of that, but when it came to do these numbers, it had to be pretty precise, and we all just looked at each other. It's like, 2 in the morning, and I used to self-publish comic books. I can letter pretty well, so I was like, all right, I'll do it. And there was just one painting, and that was probably one of the more nerve-wracking moments of the whole shoot, because the whole crew's staring at me. And I'm not used to, I don't like being in front of the camera, so, but if you watch, you can actually see I have a tattoo on my wrist, and it shows up, I think, for a couple frames.
How long did the paintings take?
The actual paintings that when he was making them? That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I know when we told him about them, and then I know when we got them, but I don't know if it took him that whole amount of time. But I mean, I think he had a month leeway to work, and then there was a few that he was finishing as we were shooting. So, but yeah, really great work. Some of them are beautiful, and you only see them for a second, like in that montage when they're going by, But yeah, they're all good. I would say I definitely have a dark sense of humor. So for me, there's dark humor throughout. I wouldn't say necessarily. I think the end, for some reason, people, especially when that note, she's putting it up, like everyone seems to find that a nice release laugh, But it also depends on the audience. Like sometimes that gets a laugh, and then sometimes it's dead silence, and it sort of depends culturally, like where we are, I guess. I would say in Brazil, no laughter whatsoever. London, everyone laughed their ass off right there. In fact, I was terrified the first time it happened, because I thought it was darkly comic, but I was like, whoa, 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 it's not that funny, right? So, yeah, it is an interesting, it depends on the audience, I think.
Time for one more.
Where was it filmed?
It was filmed in Los Angeles, right near downtown. We tried to take pains to not make it feel like Los Angeles. We tried to keep the palm trees out and the skyscrapers, but we thought we were so clever writing the movie that it could be shot in one location, but as we're getting pre-production, we're like, actually, it's 2 locations facing each other, and that's a nightmare. In an apartment complex, we're like, wait, but we need to be here for a month at night. You can buy off the neighbors for 2 nights, maybe, but when you say you have to be there for 30 days, people start to get a little itchy. So we decided to try to find an abandoned apartment complex, and there's a registry of them, and the LA City Hall has it. And we just started going from abandoned derelict building to the next until we found this one. And there was no phone number, so we mailed a letter to the owner and just crossed our fingers, and he got back to us a few weeks later. But we were able to, because it was scheduled for demolition, we were able to cut that big window out, and that was actually a really tiny window initially. We were able to tear the ceiling out and put in a light grid. The long hallway is actually 2 apartments together, and because those are 1-bedroom bungalows. So we knocked through the wall, so we could have a long sort of 2-bedroom hallway. So we were fortunate, I guess, in that regard.
Thanks so much for coming in. Thank you all for staying. Bradley will be at the pub right now if you have any more questions. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Oh, and if you like the movie, please tweet, talk about it on social media, because that, one tweet it's cliche to say now, but one tweet can make the difference between getting distribution in a place and not getting distribution. So, yeah, if you like it, talk about it. And if you didn't like it, do nothing.